Now, kiddos, we've had kind of a tough time here. We've had a civil war. We've had a president that's been assassinated. We've had a president that succeeded the presidency that had tremendous trouble with Congress to the point that he was impeached and taken to trial. Even though he was acquitted, the country's in a little bit of disarray. So it's pretty important that we try to get ourselves on some sound foundations politically in this election. So when we talk about the election of 1868, the Republicans aren't looking so much for someone that's a good president. They're looking for someone that can bring maybe some honor and integrity back to the office, okay? So keep in mind, they're not necessarily looking for someone with great political experience. They're trying to get somebody in there that would be popular with the people, and people would look at that person and say, God, there might be some hope after all this problem. So who do the Republicans turn to that they think might put us on better grounds, more with a better morale, etc.? They choose Civil War General Ulysses S. Grant as their candidate. So Republicans are going to go with General Ulysses S. Grant, Civil War hero. The problem with Grant is he has no political experience whatsoever, but is very popular with which group of the country? North. Yeah, South probably isn't that hot. But the North is, and that's where it's going to matter. Okay? So the Republicans nominate General Ulysses S. Grant, Civil War hero, who has, again, absolutely no political experience, but very popular among the Northerners. Now, the man that General Grant chose as his vice presidential running mate was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Schuyler Colfax. Okay, Schuyler Colfax will be the man that Grant chooses as his vice presidential running mate. So for the Republicans, we will have General Ulysses S. Grant and Schuyler Colfax. Now the Democratic Party is going to have a tougher time because they realize the popularity of Grant. So their counteraction is going to be to try to get somebody with some political experience in there. So their argument's going to be, hey, do you want hero or do you want experience? So the Democratic Party nominated Horatio Seymour, who was the former governor of New York, very wealthy former governor of New York. So the Democrats counter as their presidential candidate Horatio Seymour, who was a wealthy former governor of New York. And he is going to make a choice for his vice presidential running mate by going with political experience, and he chooses former congressman from Missouri, Francis P. Blair, Jr. So for the Democrats, for president, former wealthy governor of New York, Horatio Seymour, and for vice president, former congressman Francis P. Blair, Jr. of Missouri. Now, kids, obviously, have you ever heard of those other two guys ever before today? So probably they didn't win, right? But what will surprise you is the popular vote was very, very close. Popular vote, very close. They estimated that about 6 million people voted in this election, about 6 million. And of those 6 million, Grant won by just 309,000, which percentage-wise is about 5%. So he only won the popular vote by like 5%. But what do we know about political elections? And especially in this one we just had. Popular vote and 50 cents will buy you a candy bar. It's the electoral vote that counts. And because Grant won the states that had the most electoral votes, he receives 214 electoral votes to Seymour's 80. 214 to 80. And becomes the nation's 18th president. Okay, so concerning electoral votes, Grant received 214 to that of 80 for Horatio Seymour, and Ulysses S. Grant, the man with absolutely no political experience, becomes the nation's 18th president. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this lecture for this quiz and give you a profile of President Ulysses S. Grant. Tell you a little bit about him, and then you tell me if you think he's going to make a good president, because we'll talk about that a little bit later. So here's a profile on Ulysses S. Grant. First of all, he was the oldest of 6 children. He had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. So in the family, we obviously had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. But he was the oldest of those children. Ulysses S. Grant was the oldest of 6 children. He had 2 brothers and he had 3 sisters. In 1823, the Grant family moved to Georgetown, Ohio, where his father owned a tannery and owned some farmland. In 1823, the Grant family moved to Georgetown, one word, Ohio, where his father owned a tannery and farmland. You need this? Okay. So in 1823, the Grant family moved to Georgetown, Ohio, where his father owned a tannery and some farmland. Now, as a boy, Ulysses became an excellent horseman, and he was often sent on business trips for his father, even as a little boy. So Ulysses became an excellent horseman, and even as a small boy, he was often sent on business trips for his father. His father had a lot of confidence in his ability, maturity-wise, to do the trip, and obviously to ride the horse to get there. Well, Ulysses attended elementary school and high school in Georgetown, Ohio, and he graduated from high school in 1839. 1839, he graduates from the local high school in Georgetown, Ohio. And he wasn't real sure what he was going to do because college wasn't near as prevalent in those days. Well, Grant's father was visiting with a neighbor, and he found out that his neighbor's son had been dismissed from the military academy at West Point. So Grant was just visiting with his neighbor, and the neighbor informed him, my son's coming home, he just got dismissed from the military academy at West Point. Well, what did his father do then? He went to his local congressman, and he said, hey, would you be willing to appoint my son Ulysses as a replacement for that young man that just got released? So Grant's father goes to his local congressman and asks him if he would be willing to appoint his son Ulysses as a possible replacement for the young man that had been dismissed. Well, what do you think happened? Anybody want to guess? Yeah, the congressman agreed and put a word in for him, and as a result, Ulysses Grant was going to be going to West Point Military Academy after high school. Pretty good break, really, wasn't it, when you think about it? Well, during his time at West Point, Grant was listed in what they considered an average student, which we would consider as what type of student? A C student. But he did rank high in 2 areas, mathematics and horsemanship, which they graded at the academy. So he was an average student, a C student in probably in today's terms. Wouldn't have gotten this class. But he was very good in mathematics and very good in horsemanship. Well, he graduates from West Point in 1843. And what happens when you come out of West Point? You get commissioned as a officer, and then the rank depends on kind of what you did there, okay? And when Grant graduated from West Point in 1843, he was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant. So the advantage of coming out of West Point is you don't come out as an infantryman, private, you come out as an officer, and his rank, because of his efforts at West Point, was 2nd lieutenant. And what do you do when you go out of West Point and get assigned a rank? You get commissioned or assigned to some branch of the service. Well, Lieutenant Grant was assigned to the 4th Missouri Infantry Regiment. He was assigned to the 4th Missouri Infantry Regiment. And that regiment was stationed near St. Louis, Missouri. So after he graduated from West Point and was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant, Lieutenant Grant was assigned to the Missouri 4th Infantry Regiment and was stationed near St. Louis, Missouri. Guess what he did when he got there, fellas? When he got stationed in St. Louis during the time he was there. Met a woman. A young lady by the name of Julia Dent. And she was actually a sister of one of his former classmates at West Point. So he goes to St. Louis to serve in the military, and he meets this wonderful young lady like all you guys will get a chance to do someday. Her name was Julia Dent, and she was actually the sister of one of his classmates at West Point. And they fell in love, probably went to the prom together, and married in 1848. Fell in love and married in 1848. Now, at this time in history, what's the problem with being in the Army and being married? What do Army personnel do a lot? Moving around. And sometimes those moves don't allow you to take your wife with you or family if you have one. So Grant was later transferred to Fort Vancouver up here in the Oregon Territory at the time. And because it was such an isolated area, he could not take his wife and son, infant son, partially because of the isolation and partially that the Army wasn't going to pay to send his wife and son out to that location. So they had to stay behind. So Grant was transferred to Fort Vancouver in the Oregon Territory, but his wife and infant son were left behind because Army pay wouldn't support a family in that area. Now, you got a good woman, Morgan, and all of a sudden you're separated from her, what can happen to you? Hoping he has the right answers. What can happen to you? Now don't go off and say, oh, it'll be great, I have a little time away from her. That'd be the wrong answer. So what's the right answer? What happened to Grant when he got separated from his wife and infant son? Yeah, he got lonely. And loneliness can cause what? What can loneliness cause sometimes? A little depression. And what do people do to solve their depression problems? They drink alcohol. And that's what happened to Grant. He became lonely, away from his family. He became depressed and started drinking. Now, I think it's okay if you get away from Maddie to get lonely and depressed and stay away from the drinking. Okay? Come up with a different hobby. Start working out. A lot of people work out when they're depressed, right? Is this going good for you? So far? Okay, I'm helping, trying to teach you. Well, anyway, because of this, Grant became lonely and depressed and resulted in some very heavy drinking. Well, in 1853, Grant was promoted to the rank of captain, which does what to your pockets? Gives you a little more money. But he still couldn't afford to bring his family out with him because it cost money to do that. So even though he got promoted to the rank of captain, even at that higher rank, his family still had to stay behind. So, Morgan, gone to college. Now, this is a bad scenario. Gone to one college, Maddie's gone to the other. Get to college, lonely, depressed, start tipping a few. But then some good news comes. You get more money on your football scholarship to kind of, but still not enough. You still can't leave that football scholarship to go to Maddie's university, okay? And then after a while, you just miss your doggone girl, and what do? And transfer to wherever Maddie is, right? Happens sometimes. Well, that's what Grant did, only he didn't transfer in 1854 because he was missing his family so much. He simply resigned from the military and went back to St. Louis to live with his family. And see, I'm trying to prep you. Am I doing okay, man? Okay? So in 1854, because he was missing his family, he resigns from the military and returns to St. Louis. Well, his father-in-law, I think, appreciated his caring for his daughter, so he he gives him a small farm so he can work it, make a living. So his father-in-law, once he gets back to St. Louis, he gives Grant a small farm to work. Well, that'd be like giving me a small farm to work. Because why would I struggle, Michaela, with a small farm? If your father gave me a small farm because he liked me, what might be my struggle? I don't know anything about farming. So Grant was a failure. He was a failure in farming. Does that mean he's a bad guy? No. He just got handed something that he couldn't handle. Okay? So even though he enjoyed farming life, he was simply a failure in the farming business. So what did he do in 1859? He sold the farm and went and got a new job. So even though his father-in-law was kind and giving him a small farm to work at, it wasn't his thing. He was not good at it. So he sold the farm and went and got another job. Well, he went to work in a relative's real estate office. Okay? Now, what do you do, JC, if you work for a real estate office? What do these guys do in Worland here that work for these real estate places?
You sell houses.
When you go home and your mother asks you what you learned today, you can't say nothing. Okay? And Emily's exactly right. That's part of the job, though, Emily. It's a bigger part of the job, but not only do they sell houses for people for a percentage, but what else might they do as a real estate person? I come to town as the new history teacher, and dang it, I'll tell you, these houses are pretty spendy. So I go to a real estate agent and say, what do you got for sale? And she shows me everything I got for sale, and I can't afford any of it. What might she say? What might she have some info on? What?
Loans.
What?
Loans.
No, just can't afford to buy any real estate. She rentals, okay? They have a key on rentals. And so, did you say that, Casey? Okay, rentals. So what happened is Grant's job was to sell real estate and also not only find rentals, but do what with the rentals? Collect the rent, okay? Sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. But his job was to work in a real estate business and sell homes and then rent some homes out, and then his job was to collect the rents. Well, he got fired from this real estate job because he wasn't very good at collecting the rents. And if you own the real estate place, don't you think you might want your rents collected? He wasn't very good at that. So in 1859, he sells the farm, goes to work for a relative's real estate office, but was fired for not collecting the rents. Well, then he got a job in the United States Customs House. Got a job in the United States Customs House. And they didn't like his performance there, so what did they do? Fired him again. So he's having a tough time here. So Grant was hired, then fired from a job in the United States Customs House. Where's he turn next, do you think? Think about where you might turn. Who do you turn to down the dumps? My son, when he was in college, pretty good kid, but when he ran out of money, who did he turn to? Well, usually his mother first. But anyway, he turned to his family, and his father, who once lived in Ohio, sold his business in Ohio and moved to Illinois, where he opened a leather goods store. So what Ulysses S. Grant did after being fired from the United States Customs House is his dad offered him $50 a month to work in his leather goods store in Illinois. So he turns back to his family. His dad's feeling bad for him. He says, hey, you come to work for me at my leather goods store. I'll pay you $50 a month. Well, he didn't like that much. He didn't get fired. But think about the time. So now it's 1861. And Grant's been in the military. They didn't like it because of the family situation. Then he took had a farm, didn't work out, got fired from a couple of jobs. His dad hires him, but who wants to live and work for your dad? So what happens in 1861? Now, come on, really press me here. What happens in 1861? What does President Lincoln do in 1861 that catches Grant's attention? 1861. What?
Civil War and all that.
He asked for volunteers to join the Union for the Civil War, and Grant's thinking, hot dog, I've done everything else, hasn't worked out. So he becomes one of the 75,000 people that volunteer to serve in the Union side during the Civil War. So when the Civil War started in 1861, after the surrender at Fort Sumter, when Lincoln asked for 75,000 volunteers, Grant eagerly volunteered and went back into the military. And I don't have to tell you, he worked his way up the ranks, became a tremendous Civil War hero, which led to his election as president in 1868. And I'm just going to tell you, without the opportunity to go back in the military, do we ever know who Ulysses S. Grant is? You think about history, how little things happen. If Lincoln doesn't ask for 75 volunteers, and even if he doesn't, Grant decides he doesn't want to do that, there's no man you know of called Ulysses S. Grant. Well, he was very popular as president, and he was re-elected in 1872, sweeping the election. He had 286 electoral votes. His opponent only had 66. So not only did he win election in 1868, he swept to a re-election victory in 1872. It was 286 to 66. Pretty big margin of victory. 286 to 66. Bigger than the one he had the first time. So he was re-elected president in the election of 1872, sweeping the election, collecting 286 electoral votes to his opponent's 66. Now, he was willing to serve a third term, but unbelievably, because of what happened, and we'll get into that later during his administration, he didn't get the Republican nominee. That's pretty unusual for a two-term president not to get the nominee for a third. But we had some problems, not only with scandal within his administration, we had some problems with Native Americans, which we'll be talking about next during his administration, and he just did not get his party's nomination for that third term, so he left office. And what happened? He leaves office and he finds out he's dying of cancer. Okay? And he's thinking ahead. His family has no money. I mean, he didn't save money. Did he have a very good economic career before going back? We don't get paid much in the military. President pays okay, but he didn't have any money. So what did he do? And this is what most presidents do after they leave office. He did what?